Climate change is the biggest threat. The biggest threat to any kind of biodiversity, the biggest threat to any kind of nature, of course also the biggest threat for the human beings.
What do we want? Climate justice! What do we want? Now!
At some point down the line, the narrative changed to be around climate. What was the narrative prior to that? What was the justification they were giving in order to push this kind of more control from the top down?
Yeah, immediately preceding climate and environment, actually the Cold War was the pretext for having this incredibly large, incredibly powerful federal government. In fact, you see a very clear break when the Club of Rome met in 1991 as the Soviet state and the Eastern European communist states were collapsing. The Club of Rome, very, very powerful elitists. Obviously, Mikhail Gorbachev was there. You had many prominent Americans, people like Al Gore. They got together and they came up with this incredible document where they actually said we need a new justification for this all-powerful state. So the new excuse is going to be because the environment is going to be harmed and because climate is going to hurt us.
Wait, what? I could not believe what I just heard. Did world leaders really lay out this globalist plan in plain English in a physical book way back in 1991? I went on Amazon, and there it was. The First Global Revolution, which states, and I quote, "In searching for a common enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine, and the like would fit the bill. And therefore, the real enemy is humanity itself."
The science is clear. We are getting dangerously close to the point of no return.
The science is very clear. This natural world is severely endangered.
Code Red for Humanity is not a group of political officials, elected officials. These are the scientists.
There is a top-down quality to this policy which is extremely forceful, and the forcefulness comes from scientism, which is the ideology that we understand the world fully because of science. We have to listen to the science so that we have a better future for tomorrow. This is just ideological BS, and it's also quite dangerous. It's a dangerous way of looking at the world because then it means nothing matters apart from science. Culture doesn't matter, history doesn't matter, religion doesn't matter, social interaction doesn't matter, nothing matters but science. You don't need to be a theologian or philosopher to understand that that's complete nonsense, but also dangerous nonsense. If nothing matters than just science, then what kind of a world do we actually live in?
History is truly at a turning point. In times of crisis, the role of governments is more important and more relevant than ever.
The World Economic Forum is actually a critical part of implementing this UN agenda. Some years ago, they became a strategic partner of the UN in the implementation of Agenda 2030. And then you start looking at the connections between the World Economic Forum and China. Klaus Schwab and Xi Jinping, they're like old buddies. They put out press releases about how much they love each other. So you've got the super capitalists represented by the World Economic Forum. And then on the government side, you have communists. Right? After Agenda 2030 was adopted, the Communist Party in China put out through all their propaganda organs, they said, we played a critical role in this Agenda 2030. You had Javier Solana, the head of NATO, saying this was going to be the next great leap forward. Right? The last great leap forward in China killed millions of people. Why would we want another one of those? That's crazy. So you have communists and super capitalists all coming together and working on this one sustainable development agenda. And that should make us all pause and say, well, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense on the surface. What's going on here?
China is a powerful example of what can be achieved when national governments make environmental protection a top priority.
The motivations of those who are pushing this agenda, many of them tend to emulate countries like China, which have abysmal environmental records. This is a country that has massive pollution problems. They don't seem to care about rivers and lakes and streams. There's all sorts of toxins pouring into them. In actuality, I would say their envy of China is more to do with their control over their population and control over politics than it has to do with the environment. In looking at this, it looks like the environment's a tool to achieve power more than it is an end goal of itself to actually protect nature.
It's about climate. It's about protecting native plants, human health, indigenous species. It's about clean water. I still don't know what this is really all about, but there's no doubt that there's a real attack on farmers happening on every corner of this planet, which logically poses one very obvious question.
If you get rid of the farmers, you still need to eat something, especially protein, right?
Maybe they don't want the food production like it is right now. I mean, we produce potatoes, and we produce milk, and we produce meat, and maybe there's a government who doesn't want us to eat anymore that kind of food.
Instead turn to what?
Oh, insects, bugs, I don't know. There are these new projects where insects are grown.
The people who are getting kicked off the land, are they, like, some of them talking about moving to insect farming?
No. I don't know any farmer who now works with cows who wants to be an insect farmer. Absolutely not. Yeah. It's like a nightmare thing. Even as a consumer, I think. Yeah. I don't want to eat insects.
Yeah, no.
I don't know if they're good for me.
Where you look, small and medium-sized farms being gobbled up by these corporate mega farms because they can't keep up anymore. They can't comply with these endless streams of regulations that are coming down. We're seeing that in China now, where these giant mechanized corporate, big government-controlled mega farms are displacing all these little small family farms that families have been farming for hundreds of years, in some cases longer. They're moving them all off their little plots of land and moving them into these big, horrific mega cities that they have built. And we're going to see that all over the world with the decimation of small farms. So if they're not bankrupted by economic forces, the government itself will shut them down.
Well, everything is falling apart. There is a shortage of food. Many people do not have enough money to eat every day.
Everybody's out here today because they understand that when our government actually expropriates our farmers, we're all next.
Not just Holland is now facing these types of regulations, but you can see the attack on farmers all over the world. It's an agenda that is carried out on a global level, that is being pushed through government officials in respective countries.
This is precisely how the globalists have managed to take over national parliaments and national governments.
20 countries equal 80% of all the emissions. You solve the problem to start with by making sure all of those 20 countries are doing what they need to do. We have to pull them to the table and leverage further. So how do we get there? Well, the lesson I've learned in the last year is money, 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 money.
They're following a script where they are thinking already from the perspective of a global, bureaucratic, quasi-totalitarian system of governing, system of rule. This is an agenda, and all these countries are implementing the same policies. So they've targeted the farmers because that's the agenda.
When the American nation was founded, 95% of the people were homestead citizens. They had their own land. And they were completely independent, autonomous. They raised their own food. They were outspoken. They were economically viable. Farming serves two purposes. It doesn't just produce food, but it produces citizens.
John, can you give us an idea of how much it's costing you to operate your farm right now this year compared to the same time last year?
Well, right now things have tripled as far as costs for my own farming operation and for many farmers across the country. And I think you're going to see across the board higher food prices.
Food prices are already up dramatically this year, last year a little bit too, and we might see more empty shelves in America. Even the president is promising food shortages in his conversation, so there's no need for this to be happening. The people are the ones that are going to be hurt. Not just farmers, trying to make a living. It's going to be the food supply of this country, which is a staple of our security, of our nation, being able to grow the grain and the crops that we do, that not only supplies us, but our allies and other trading partners around the world.
We are headed into, I think, a time of very significant food shortages. Can we expect to see massive increases in food prices next year? Oh, no question about it. So I think the end goal of the war on farmers that we're seeing, which is guided at every step by the Sustainable Development Goals and Agenda 2030, is going to be a total consolidation of agriculture, a total consolidation of the food supply, and as every communist tyrant of the last 100 years has understood, if you control the food, you control the people. I think that's ultimately the end goal.
So, what now? Do we fall in line with the UN, sacrifice our current diets, and instead turn to alternative sources of protein, like insects? Do we sacrifice our small, independent farmers and their livelihoods in favor of species that may or may not be endangered? Or plants that can't be replaced by trees because of an agreement made between politicians last century? Do we strip all farmers, worldwide, of synthetic fertilizers that they say are essential to feed our population? If America was built to be governed by the people, then it should be the people who make these decisions, right? And if small businesses are failing and the middle class is shrinking, while food prices skyrocket and grocery store shelves become bare, then perhaps it's time that we take a look at what's happening to our friends over in Asia and Europe and decide if their path is the right one to follow.
There's a group of people that is thinking they're doing everything good for nature. And they are against farmers. And why? I don't know. Because they think we do everything wrong.
Hello, how are you doing? Sadly, very, very sad. In the neighborhood here are the 6 people who killed themselves because they don't see how it must go further. Mostly are cow farmers. Yeah, the government in Holland, they're crazy, they're f***ing crazy. I hope that you can tell in your story about the anger and that people don't know what to do and they finish with their own lives and everything. Yeah, you can tell that to the world.
The reason that so many people are suddenly so interested in what's happening over in the Netherlands is because the policies being pushed there are very similar. They, in fact, quite literally mirror the policies being pushed here in America. I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. Stay informed, and most importantly, stay free.